Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, September 11th edition of the Fluster API Office Hours, a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. We do try to keep some meeting etiquette during this meeting, so please use the Zoom raise hand feature if you want to bring anything up. We have relatively light agenda today, so please go ahead and add anything that you wish to bring up to the agenda, and I'm linking that in the Zoom chat right now. To start with, we have a few PSAs. So the V1 Alpha 2 release has been cut. The 0.2.1 release for Core Cluster API, version 0.1.0 for the kubeadm Bootstrapper, version 0.4.0 for the AWS provider, vSphere is at version 0.5.1, and the Docker provider at version 0.2.0. So you can take a look at those links. And thanks to Vince, we also have an updated quick start guide as well. So if you haven't been playing around with V1 Alpha 2 yet, please go ahead and give that quick start test out and give some feedback on it. All right. Do we have any topics before we start getting into the project status updates? Nope. All right, then let's go ahead with the project status. Andy, do you want to take Cappy?
Yeah, so I didn't have a chance to list out the individual bug fixes. I can go back and do that in a little while, but largely what we've been working on are some improvements around machine sets and machine deployments and how we do patching. We had an issue that's in the 0.2.1 release where we might lose some of the I believe it was owner references that we were trying to set. And so Jason got in a PR to fix that. We also had another PR that fixes a problem where if you have a machine deployment and you have an existing machine set for that machine deployment and you change the labels that the machine deployment is using, then the old machine set that ultimately needs to be scaled down and deleted after the new one comes up, that old machine set wasn't getting deleted. And so there's a bug fix that just went in for that. And I believe there's also some documentation updates as well, which are live on the site right
now. All right, Chuck, do you want to take the kubeadm Bootstrap provider?
Yeah, there's nothing too much going on right now. We're adding support for we're adding testing, and also adding support for external etcd/partially supplied set of cluster CAs. And there's a reasonably large PR open right now that I'd love some feedback on. But otherwise, nothing major there. And then for CapD, same, no major developments.
All right, for the AWS provider, I've started working on rebuilding out the ED test suite for V1 Alpha 2. I have a link to the work in progress PR that I have right now. As of right now, it deploys all the V1 Alpha 2 components, and that's about it right now, but I want to get it to where it's also spinning up a cluster as well before I remove that work in progress label. So if you're interested in the EDE testing process there, please provide feedback. Hopefully it'll provide a decent model for other providers to also follow for testing as well. And it looks like Vince added in a topic there too about adding the automated Prow image build on the master PR merge. And this is something that can be applicable to any of the providers, granted they are using the Kubernetes staging repositories for Docker images and the image promoter process. The tooling now that creates the staging buckets also grants permissions for Google Cloud Build, and we have template jobs that are in place that can automate the building of images through Prow. So all of the underlying infrastructure is in place to enable this for anybody using the staging buckets now. Cat V, Andrew?
Thank you. I actually had a question about that. Did y'all happen to look at Cat V for the prowl imaging? Because we've been doing that for a few months now, and I was wondering if that was used as a reference or it was just built from scratch.
So it was sort of built by scratch because we were conforming with the tooling that was being put in place by the CATES infra working group.
Okay, fair enough.
Leverage the image promoter and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know we had a discussion at VMware a few months ago, or I wasn't there for it, but DIMS was, and I think at the time the decision was not to go with the image promotion model for reasons. DIMS and Travis can talk about those, but it's neither here nor there. We're investigating it again to see if it fits our needs. But yeah, we've been using Prowl for a bit. We just didn't find that like the GitHub Actions or other services worked as well for image promotion. So Cat V V51 was released, which included I'm on the wrong thing to make an edit here, which included CAPI 021. And there are currently outstanding PRs for support for the Atatree vSphere cloud provider. So I encourage people working on Kappa and other infra providers to reach out to Andrew Sykem. I think we're doing a lot of front running here in Cat V for some of the things that we're doing. The vSphere cloud provider is probably one of the more advanced cloud providers. And so we're looking to change it to the default, the external one. And so we're having to solve some unique problems like how you add manifest to target clusters, but not the bootstrap cluster. And how do you version those and how do you apply those? And currently we're using client Go, but we're investigating maybe using unstructured data as a way to create those. So yeah, I encourage people to reach out to Andrew. I think eventually all the infra providers will have to go down that route. We also, thanks to Yassine, have an open PR. Unfortunately, he asked for me to review that first thing in the morning when I'm generally at my most attentive, and he 48 pieces of feedback for me. But it's support for the load balancer kept that Moshe proposed a while back. It adds support for load balancers to Cat V when it's running on VMC on AWS. It isn't hard coded into Cat V to use this feature. It's a separate controller that we were going to use as a POC for maybe potentially a new service in Kubernetes. But it's something that we need in Cat V to be able to do HA testing. And since our platform is VMC, this buys us that. And the last thing that I was going to type out, and I honestly can't remember what it was now, I think it was related to the E2E tests. I know Andrew has been working on a framework for that as well, Jason. So I don't know if you and he have worked together. I feel like there's maybe opportunities for more communication because it sounds like Kappa and Cap V have been doing a lot of the same things. But I don't see the PR at the moment. So I think Andrew may have closed it and is going to reintroduce it since we refactored to V1 Alpha 2. Yeah, if that wasn't clear, V51 is V1 Alpha 2. So that's all I have right now for Cat V.
Thank you, Andrew. Vince, do you want to take the Google provider?
Yeah, I can. Justin said like he was going to join later, so we can go last. But I had a comment for the findings about that Andrew brought up. If we can just like document these like in issues in CAPI, that would be great as well, so that we can use that at the planning for next week.
They're not really issues, and I don't really think issues work for finding. Maybe a Google Doc to document like findings in Cat V that or other infra providers that might be applicable to V1 Alpha 3.
Yeah, if there are like shortcomings, like
it's not a shortcoming. It's something CAPI can't even satisfy. I mean, it's more of a pattern than anything, Vince. It's like, how do you? Yeah, it's not something I don't necessarily think CAPI can. I'll leave that to Andrew though, Vince, because he handled it, so he can best decide how to do that.
Okay.
But either way, like however we document it, I totally agree with you that it definitely is something worth discussing. Is like common patterns. I mean, it's not necessarily part of an API contract, but as moving forward, there are just these common patterns we're going to see between providers. And there's clearly a lack of communication that we need to reconcile. so that we don't reinvent these designs.
Yeah, the reason I was mentioning that is because, like, I remember, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, that we talked about like add-on management for when we bring up a control plane, and you mentioned to like apply some YAML to the target cluster, which we do have like some kind of like way to think about that for like.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Talk about control planes, so this might be a good thing to bring up so that it's another use case.
Absolutely, yeah. No, yeah, Andrew will be there next week. I unfortunately will not. So
Sounds good.
All right. You want to skip over the Google provider until Justin's here, Vince. So let's move on to OpenStack with Stefan.
Yeah. So currently working on the problem, or more or less just doing what you did before. I think the PRs are merged, right? Were merged a few hours ago. So I'll take a look and just do the same. and yeah, otherwise just working on documentation and hopefully the release for V1 Alpha 2.
Outstanding, thanks. Do we have anybody for CapZ Azure?
Yeah, Craig Peters here. We're just making progress right now on setting up our EDE testing using the V1 Alpha 1 release right now. Nothing major to report at this point.
All right. Any time frame on V1 Alpha 2 adoption yet?
Working towards that in the next month.
Okay. All right.
We'll
Thank
have
you.
more details to talk about next week at the face-to-face.
All right. Great. Thanks. All right. MetalCube. Do we have Michael or Doug? No. All right. R. Smitty for Bootstrap provider Talos.
Hey, yeah. So started work this week on kind of just really plugging back in after being out for a few weeks on the Cappy stuff. But yeah, so it looks like as far as Talos goes, our provider will basically become a Bootstrap provider, and hopefully we can strip out all the infrastructure things that we implemented and use the upstream stuff. So looking forward to that. And yeah, so we're hoping in the next probably month or so to have everything kind of out there. So work goes on.
Awesome. One question that I have is right now with the Kube-ADM Bootstrapper, we have image baking. Is that something that will be needed with Talos as well, or is there a different way to handle selecting the right image based on Kubernetes version?
The image is kind of, well, it's a good question, and I probably need to understand a little more about it, I think. But we do publish images, yeah, per Talos release that are tied to a certain Kubernetes version and a certain QAtom version. So those aren't tweakable, I guess. There's no Kubernetes version inside of it that you can tweak. It's all immutable. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like right now you would have to kind of override that behavior and specify a specific image for at least if you want to leverage like the AWS provider, for example.
Yeah, it looked like you could specify an AMI, I guess, in your templates and stuff, right? So yeah, we'll definitely have to do that for sure.
Yeah, will you be there for the V1 Alpha 3 planning at all?
I can be, sure. That's helpful. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm just saying because it's happening next week.
Oh, is this the in-person thing? Oh, no.
Yes,
sorry, yeah,
exactly. Okay. I was going to say it might be good to bring up some of that stuff when we were talking about V1 Alpha 3 to figure out how we can automate things, especially around like upgrade and all of that to help ease that burden. But as you get further along, we can tackle that as we come across it as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Upgrade tool. Amy, did you want to take that?
Sure. So I linked in that work in progress highlight where the PR is, so you can follow progress there if you're interested. It's definitely very much a work in progress, so let me emphasize that. So far, what I did is just like update all the imports and hunt down relevant changes that moved like repositories. And then I also updated code changes to copy the new CRDs. So today, I'm hoping to run it against V1 Alpha 1 and smooth out some of the bumps. And then after that, I'll add some tests. So finger crossed, hopefully it is smooth today.
All right, thank you, Amy. Any other topics or agenda items before we move into issue triage?
Jason, I just wanted to comment on the question from Andrew in chat about if we're going to have any time at the face-to-face to talk about E2E testing. We do have a proposed agenda document, which I will pull up here real quick. So nothing is set in stone agenda-wise, but we have a lot of possible topics and some place down at the bottom to write more descriptive text if you want to expand on a single bullet. So definitely come in here, and there's no wrong topic to suggest. So add whatever you'd like, and I imagine when we get started at the face-to-face on Tuesday next week, we'll probably review this list and decide what we want to talk about.
All right. Any other topics before we move on to the issue triage? All right, over to you, Andy.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 issues with no milestone for Cluster API. We'll go bottom up as usual. So this is a cleanup and backlog priority task. I would say given that, then it needs to be in the next milestone. Chuck, do you think this is a help wanted good first issue type of thing?
Probably. Yeah, I could see that being a good first issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And machine should not stay in running phase after the infrastructure object has been deleted. I believe this is where if you have like an AWS machine and you delete it, the Cluster API machine sticks around and just says it can't find the infrastructure object. In terms of priority and milestone, this might be nice to try and get into the 02X series so that we fix this with our V1 Alpha 2 minor release. What do y'all think? Yay, nay? I see Jason shaking his head and thumbs up. All right, so we'll go 02X. I'm thinking important soon. It's not critical urgent. All right. And the last one for Cluster API proper, this one does have an open pull request. And I know we had some back. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that this probably needs a little more discussion around if this is the direction we want. I don't think I need this anymore, but if we're trying to get rid of the static client, then this issue could become sort of generic, get rid of the static client in favor of controller runtime client.
Right. Was somebody going to say something? No. So I know that there was some conversation back and forth about this yesterday on, or at least in the pull request, on whether or not it's appropriate to rename or delete methods that are in Cluster API that providers might be using. And I don't know that we have an official documented policy, given that we're pre-GA, so we're still alpha, and things tend to break as we are working on stuff. But I think we probably should open up an issue to discuss what sort of library level guarantees we want to have in Cluster API. I don't think that's anything that we can decide quickly, given how much the discussion went yesterday. So Chuck, I'll at least stick this in next, and I'll let you think about it and decide if you want to keep this open or close it.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the community. If folks are happy with using this interface, that's fine with me. It's not super useful for my uses, so I'm not using this like interface anymore. But
okay. Yeah, I guess I would say if you don't need to make this change, then at least for right now, we can just close it.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Chuck. And that was it for Cluster API. We have a few in the Qbdm Bootstrapper as well. So I'd like to go through these. The first one is we should return without an error if no cluster is set on the machine. Could this be a help wanted good first issue, Chuck?
Maybe. I think there's a little more to think about with this issue. Maybe someone who's a bit familiar with the project,
okay.
But maybe not a first issue.
Do you think this is something that needs to be fixed?
No.
Okay, so next.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Similar, should an error if the worker node doesn't have a join config. Oh, this one I think had a lot of back and forth commentary from y'all.
Yeah, I think Fabrizio is working on this one.
Is this something we need to fix for V1 Alpha 2?
Not need to. No, this is not a need to fix. This is an improvement for the user.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this awesome issue you opened, testing for expected behaviors. I'm just gonna put the next milestone on here.
I would like to get this in the next patch release unless that's happening next
okay.
week. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's scheduled, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick these up like one a week or something just to get through them if they don't end up getting done by anybody else. But
okay.
This is, for anybody listening, this is a great way to get involved with the Bootstrap provider.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Oh yeah, I ran into this when I was testing. I think this is something we should identify and try and correct as part of.
Yeah, I think I know this one too. We should fix this one.
And this one I know you're working on with your certificates PR, right?
Yeah, that's got an open PR for it, fixing this.
Okay. And that is all of the Cluster API and Qbdm Bootstrapper issues that don't have or didn't have milestones on them. Anything else that's worth going over in any of the other repos that anybody wants to talk about, or any general questions, comments, concerns?
So Andy, I just realized that we had skipped over the Google provider update, and I still don't see Justin. So do you want to do that real quick, Vince?
Yeah, sure. So for CapG, we updated the whole repo to V1 Alpha 2. This is like a big breaking change from what was in there before, and we moved all code to the release 0.1 branch. Unfortunately, there isn't a release yet for the V1 Alpha 1, but we'll try to get a V1 Alpha 2 release in time, like in the next few weeks. If you have any experience with GCP and you would like to contribute, please reach out. We do need new contributors and maintainers, so this would be a great opportunity to just get involved. And lastly, I will work with Justin to kind of like clean up the open pull request or issues. Just stay tuned. We don't have any docs yet as well, so stay tuned for that as well.
Andrew, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was actually had it up since before the Bootstrapper. I just didn't want to interrupt. Two things. It was related. One was related to Chuck's issue about the client. I think we talked about it in Slack. My one comment on that is my main concern. I don't want to be blocked. I don't think anyone wants to be blocked about pulling in a 2x or a 3x, whatever released. I know we're alpha, right? But there's a security fix or a bug fix, but there's some other issue that's come in that requires additional technical debt. In the meantime, that's the situation with which I'm concerned, you know. And Andy, to your credit, I mean, in that Slack conversation on KK, right? You're like, yeah, we need to avoid this. I just didn't know if everyone saw that conversation and wanted to say that. I mean, you were in favor of trying to avoid redactive changes in these minor releases so that people can upgrade as they need. And then I did have one issue. It's on Cap V. It's 555. I'm going to paste it in chat, Jason, because it relates to CAPI. And I have an open PR to fix this for Cap V, but I really don't like the PR. Essentially, it's what happens if you specify a control plane endpoint in your kubeadm config in advance. The current CAPI model, I don't think really accounts for this, because what happens is it really relies on your cluster controller or some controller in your repository, right, to be the thing that updates the cluster's API endpoints, which is what that kubeconfig secret gets generated from. And so this situation is, well, what if you set up a load balancer in advance and you're deploying machines with static IPs and your load balancer is set up to point to those IPs? Well, what ends up happening is, sorry, with yard services outside. What ends up happening is of course that there's no way that the cluster knows about that control plane endpoint. And so my PR does actually it loops over control plane machines and looks for the kubeadm config's control plane endpoint, which I don't like. I don't think I want to read that. That assumes knowledge of those types, but I don't know a great way around this. We'd had a conversation here, and I think I made a suggestion at the bottom of this issue where maybe we could add a field in V1A3 to the spec for a cluster, like control plane endpoint, like we have the service and CIDRs, so that we can avoid this issue. But if anyone else encounters this, there's an issue for Cap V, but it's more related to CAPI as a whole. Yeah, there's a proposal down at the, not really a proposal, but just, you can see the YAML. Just if we added something like that, then, you know, when we're generating manifests, then the cluster would know about the control plane endpoint as well. And it could set that to its API endpoint, or it could set its API endpoints to that value. Since again, Vince, I think I actually thought I kept going in loops on this, and I realized what's happening is I believe the code that you wrote that generates the kubeconfig secret is looking at API endpoints. And so that's why what was happening in this case was that the kubeconfig secret had the IP address of the control plane node, not the control plane endpoint specified ahead of time. So yeah. So I encourage people to take a look at this because maybe you encounter it with your info provider.
Right.
I don't think Kappa ever will because it creates its own load balancers. But.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to one of the discussions we had towards the end of the V1 Alpha 2 cycle, which was, can we separate the control plane endpoint from the API endpoints and have distinct use cases around those fields, rather than kind of the way that we overload the API endpoints field today as well. Andy?
I'll add, there's also just the aspect of, if you do that separation, having the infrastructure provider maintain and generate and maintain that separation versus you bringing your own API load balancer URL to the equation. Because even if we split it out, like, you still need a way for the user to supply it and for the system to use it.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is that if there was a separate control plane endpoint field, then the API endpoints become strictly whatever the cluster controller puts there with respect to the actual API endpoints on the control plane nodes. And there may be cases where that matches up to control plane endpoint, but most likely they won't. And the control plane endpoint may end up being derived from one of those API serve endpoints. But like in Kappa's case, the control plane endpoint is going to be the LB FQDN. So, yeah. But yeah, I think this is like a good V1A3 issue. And like I said, we have a PR. It just requires reading the kubeadm config, which I don't like doing because, like I said, it assumes, you know, I'm going to assume the kubeadm bootstrapper. I know I could check and pull in more types if I need to, but that's what I'm doing for now. And the other option is that all bootstrappers should support like a standard field pattern for control plane endpoint. All bootstrap providers, much like we have status API endpoints and status ready for infra providers, so that we could use an unstructured reader on the bootstrap ref. But I don't like that either. So, but it is what it is for now.
So this is probably a great topic for next week's face-to-face. Any other topics, comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
So I have this requirement. I need to create labels on nodes. So there's even a field on machine spec, namely named object meta, which in the document it says this field helps set labels to nodes. So in the code, I haven't seen any references to that field that could help set those labels. So is there, well, can you provide any pointers or should I file an issue?
Andy?
Yeah, so I think you're correct. There's nothing, the only thing that we do right now is if you're using the kubeadm bootstrapper and you specify the initial node labels in the kubeadm configuration, then we will set those initial node labels. It's a one-time set at node registration. They are not reconciled and kept up to date. And there is at least one, if not two, issues in Cluster API talking about labels. So again, for right now, you can, if you're using kubeadm, you can just get the initial ones set.
Yeah, initial ones are great. So should I or should I not be using machine spec?
No.
Object meta should not. Okay. All right. Yeah, that was the question. Thank you.
All right, Tim?
With the face-to-face next week, do we have logistics and details for remotees who want to attend, who can't attend? We cannot use the community thing for that long a period of time because we will have to use some other Zoom URL that we need to send because we just can't.
I think, oh, go ahead.
Were you going to say something, Jonas?
I was just going to say, I think we decided that we weren't going to try to get a Zoom going for the whole time because that proved to be potentially difficult to do, but that we would make sure to take copious notes and try to transcribe everything in a way that can be read afterwards.
Is there still a way to get there to face-to-face? I haven't RSVP'd, and so.
Yeah, I mean, we still have space, I think, for 1 or 2 people on the doc. So if you're able to make it to San Francisco next week for those 2 days, then yes, that is a possibility.
Oh, that's great.
Vince?
I was going to say, like, I don't see that we canceled the next week meeting. So maybe we can just use that time to kind of like update the larger community that cannot attend with progress and just present something.
I like that.
Yeah.
Andy?
So I will say, as someone who has been a remote participant to a 6 or 8 hour meeting in the past, generally what's happened in my experience is you can hear about 20% of the conversation and you can't see anything that's going on. I'm 100% in favor of trying to set up a Zoom or some other conference for people to dial in, but I will caution you that you probably won't hear much. It's just the nature of being in a meeting room and having, we'll probably have some group conversations, and we'll probably have some breakouts, and we'll do our best to accommodate remote participation, but it's tough, just speaking from experience.
Andrew?
I'll say I've done that as well, Andy. And I mean, it's possible. It just has to be a priority and a focus on the face-to-face. And I feel like when it is a distributed community like this, it should be a priority from the get-go to include those who can't travel for various reasons but would like to attend. So yes, I mean, face-to-face is ideal if you don't have to worry about it, but it's not like you're getting together with like the team you work with at your company. I mean, this is a really distributed group across multiple companies, and inability to travel shouldn't be, shouldn't exclude those who would like to participate.
So I will say that the output of the face-to-face isn't something that is like going to be dictated down to the community. The output of the face-to-face is something to be consumed by the community, give feedback on, and then that results in the outcome as well. So I don't want it to make it seem like, the face-to-face is the end-all and be-all of what V1 Alpha 3 and the planning is going to be. It should just be a way to help facilitate higher bandwidth conversations to get things started.
Vince, I'm already married, but I mean, I'm flattered. Oh, wait, that's not what you meant. Sorry.
Not at all. But yeah, I guess the outcome will be caps, and those will go to the same kind of iteration that we did last time. Maybe a shorter one because we already had a bunch of discussions with large community. But yeah, definitely more comments, the better. I want to make everybody happy in the community and involve everybody.
Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much.